Hello there! Welcome to the Passive Portfolio Podcast, an art podcast hosted by me, Samira, and my best friend slash co-host, West. West, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is West. I am a currently enrolled undergraduate studying biology with a minor in studio art, pursuing illustration.
And I am Samira. I'm a hobbyist slash partially sometimes business artist who likes to focus on character work and loves colors. The Passive Portfolio Podcast is a show where my co-host West and I sit down and chat about artwork we've made, give each other critique and compliments, and overall talk shop about the joy and anguish of being hobbyist slash studying slash suffering artists. And today on this episode, we are going to be suffering. That is the main word of tonight. We will be discussing pieces that we were disappointed with, or otherwise dissatisfied with, in hopes of figuring out at least a little bit what we can do to improve these pieces, as assessed by not only ourselves, but each other. And I don't see why we gotta linger on this. I feel like we just jump in to make sure we don't jump out first. Here's my piece. This is another commissioned work. If you're new here, I doubt you are. I'm sure, if you're new here and you haven't checked out the other episodes, please go check those out. I don't know why you're watching number 3 of 4. I take commission work, and I would say this is the most arduous commission I have ever taken. And it was entirely my fault. For context, I had worked with this client before. They were super sweet. They were actually like one of my first clients, and they came back because they liked my art. I really should have thought about it a little bit more first. I took this commission at a time where I already had around 4 other commissions on the wait list that were somewhere between like 3/4 completed, half completed, like we're basically there, I just can't look at it anymore, stuff like that. And this piece was a lot more experimental, and that's the best word, experimental, than I expected it to be. And now experimental, like I just said, great word, except when it's for money. You don't want to experiment with money. I had a financial responsibility to complete a sketch I was unqualified for, and on top of that, took me about a month, and I finished it in 2 hours when I actually sat down and did it again, so somehow it's both late and rushed. Can you believe that? I had never drawn a skeleton before, which is really nerve-wracking to take as an artist when half of the piece this person is paying you. I think they paid me around $80 to $100 for this. I think maybe less if this was during an era where I hadn't raised my prices. And I felt so bad. I was like, I loved the sketch, and then I dropped it for 2 weeks, and I was like, I came back to it. Wasn't good, but we had to power through. Ultimately, this piece has multiple anatomy issues. If you look at this for any longer than 2 seconds, you're gonna see some big anatomy issues. Overall, strange color choice, especially with the background. The background is very rushed. It has a lot of evidence of such. The flames, the chain, all of this. These are all stuff. This is all, like, detailed work I would usually never skimp out on. Which sucks, because I feel like given more time, care, and study, it could have been great. There's a lot of things here I really like, but not everything was a winner, unfortunately. The client enjoyed the piece. They were very sweet. They gave me compliments, and I was like, thank you. I feel so guilty. I couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. I was like, you came back to me, and I somehow gave you something 10 times worse for 10 times the money. I felt terrible. But the thing with this episode is that it's not all about negativity. We're not just going to go wallow in our little pits of self-deprecation. I love the colors I chose for the characters, minus the background. The characters look great. And I think for how quickly I did the color work, the lighting was really fun to play around with.
I wanted to add, I think your work, this is like one of my favorite ones in terms of like your use of contrast on figure, um, using like a really bright light source. And I wanted to just sort of like emphasize the fact that like you do have a really strong, um, like sense of lighting in this piece that I think is really effective, on like your forms. And I think you should at least be proud of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely think that is a highlight. I feel like that is what really saved this image overall. Despite all of its flaws, I still do really, really love the lighting work I did. I feel like it was fun practice, but again, don't practice on your commissions. Don't do that. That's not what you should do. um, yeah, I really just couldn't figure this anatomy out. Especially since I hadn't really drawn any skeletal figures before beyond very stylized skeletons that will not be named. And and I think I definitely could have done this piece better. I didn't help that I lost my reference. I had spent so long not looking at this piece that I lost my references, and so I just completely ignored it and went in without knowing what I was doing. Don't do that. Don't do that. But yeah, I think I could definitely
will
have improved
say
this, but
that I do really love the skeleton figure, despite the fact that you were unfamiliar with it.
I really appreciate that. I definitely think he is my favorite part of this image, all things considered. Just took a lot of trial and error and really utilizing that bunchy fabric to hide my mistakes. Yeah, I think that's all I really have to say about this one, other than I am so sorry to that client who was oh so sweet to me. All those moons ago. It was like, I don't know why I'm saying all those moons ago. It was like 3 weeks ago. I'm sure that they're still in my emails somewhere. But, well, whatever. So long as they like it, I guess I can't rag on myself too hard. There's always next time. Moving on, though, this was a piece you did for a Zine, right? And if you want to
Yes.
explain quickly, I don't know how many people will know what a Zine is, at least in this
Yeah.
context.
At least so for the context of an artist design, artist designs are a collection of multiple artists who create visual works. Sometimes they are collaborative as well with like writers in digital medias, to create a final collection, that is essentially a magazine. That's where Zine comes from. This piece had very strict proportions, that it had to meet to fit the page requirements. And it also had very strict, well, it had to meet a theme, which in this case, the theme was a night at the casino.
Which I will say, I do think you got across the casino vibe nicely.
Thank you. But this piece, I kind of had a similar experience as you did with your commission piece, in which I started the piece a while prior and then took a long time to get to it, and then in the end it only took me about like 2 hours to finish.
Yeah, which I love our matching procrastination. There's a reason we're
we
friends.
we are friends for a reason. But we procrastinated our pieces, and I think with mine you can also kind of tell. At least in the shading and rendering of the figures and stuff. As well as like the lack of texture in the background.
Uh-huh. I think it was very entertaining. For context, West finished this piece while talking to me for about all of that 2 hour period. And so I watched him in real time go from, I think you had finished either the sketch or the line art. I don't know which phase you were on necessarily. I watched him complete this 2.5 hours before the deadline.
Yes.
And he had had like 2 months to work on it.
We
And it was
don't
honestly...
talk about it.
It was honestly a bonding experience I won't forget anytime soon. I was just playing video games, and ever so often I'd look over and Wes would be trying his best.
Doing my best. That's a good way of putting it.
I think this piece, I really do enjoy this piece, all things considered. Like, obviously, I know it was rushed. I watched it happen. But I think it kind of pulls itself together in some quirky little ways. I enjoy the figure in the front's expression so much. I think it's so silly and smug, and he definitely just lost all of his money.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely he did. And I think for all you said, this piece was flat, which I do understand to some extent, like, if I'm looking at it very objectively. I really do love the colors you chose. As you can tell, I'm definitely a big fan of color. I love when you color things. But as another point, though, I really, really love the figure in the back, just as in its entirety. I love the combination of the turquoise braids with the purple dress. I think that's such a fun look. Only thing is, I would say about the figure in the back, I do think you could have gotten away with making that cabinet that his head is right next to not brown. I think that that was kind of a choice made.
Yeah, sorry about that, little man.
But I mean, honestly, I would definitely say that this is pretty solid for being completed in like 2.5 hours. There are some areas where you could have, like you said, deepened your shading a little bit, and the contrast could have been worked on a bit more. But like overall, like, I mean, I freaking love the colors. I love the designs, and I think you really get a good sense of these characters just from how they are standing and how they are emoting.
I appreciate that.
I think then if that's kind of all we got to say, I'm not mad at myself. There is stuff to like about it. I think a big part of my artist journey was realizing that it's okay to make art that is not fully to your standards necessarily, because chances are there's still a lot of good to be found in it. The lighting, for example, in mine, and the overall dynamics of everything, had I put more time in it, they feel very solid. I think in the end, the piece itself looks a bit amateur in areas that it wouldn't look otherwise had I not spent so much time procrastinating it and then finishing it in 2 hours and then blah, blah, blah. And I was a bit out of my depth, out of my comfort zone without much padding. But, you know, what can you do?
Yeah, I was in a very similar spot with mine. You know, I created a lot of sketches for this piece, and I ended up choosing one of the most complicated ones in terms of like lighting and like composition. And that on top of a short deadline, on top of I just don't know what I'm doing, was not a great combination. But I think I did the best that I could given the time frame and boundaries I set for myself. It looks really good, genuinely, like in the context of the final design, which is kind of what matters the most. But I definitely want to work on not rushing pieces last minute. And also for things like this, I don't think it's a really good idea for me to try and push myself because of an insecurity of not fulfilling, you know, the expectations of the people leading design. Because I'm like, well, they chose me based on the art that they saw. I shouldn't try to push my art to be something it's not.
Whereas I definitely should have kept to my comfort zone a little bit more. I think I got over ambitious, whereas you overcompensated. A lot of overs today.
Yeah.
Speaking of over, the episode is over.
Yeah.
Next episode we will be discussing. Well, next episode's actually the final episode. We'll be discussing pieces that we think defined our art, or at least an era of our art. Lots of positivity next episode over this episode's passive negativity.
Get some sunshine and rainbows out.
And then that's our last huzzah. So thank you so much for listening to the Passive Portfolio Podcast, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.